Hey, Lynette, welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver Show. How are you?
Good, Elizabeth. It's great to see you. It's
I
great to
know
be
it's been a
here.
while. It's been a while.
Yeah,
We've done some things, and then we're coming back together, and we can sync up and learn. I want to hear all about what you're up to now. I'm excited to. We've got lots to talk about. But I know that I know you, but a lot of people who are watching the show or listening to the show have not met you before. So would love to just introduce yourself, introduce in particular your caregiving experience, if you could expand on that as well. So take it away, Lynette.
sure. Well, thank you again for having me, Elizabeth. My roots are in medicine. I trained as a physician assistant and I worked in internal medicine for a while. Uh, and then I transitioned into pharmaceutical research. And when I was doing pharmaceutical research, I was doing some research on Alzheimer's drugs. So that's how I became involved really in the Alzheimer's world and with caregivers and learning that their challenges. And then from there, I went to a nonprofit that helped caregivers keep their loved ones home. And we provided volunteers to go into the home for a few hours every week for free to just give caregivers a break. And that was really my first introduction into direct service for caregivers. And then from there, I moved into the executive director role of that nonprofit. All this was in perfect parallel to my own life, where my parents were aging and I became the caregiver for them. So, first for my dad, who had a vascular dementia and a host of medical problems. And then after he passed away, my mother moved in with me in 2011. And in the course of her living with me, she developed Alzheimer's disease. So I was the caregiver for her for 8 years until she passed away on June of 2020. So it's been a long, long caregiving journey, both professionally and personally, and it gives me a different perspective of this world, I think.
I know. And thank you for sharing that, first of all. And I know, I'm sure your professional experience helped inform your caregiving experience, and we're going to benefit from that by talking to you. And then, but also wanted to just express my condolences for your loss of your mom. It's a recent loss. I know you probably had years of anticipatory grief as you grieve the different stages of Alzheimer's, especially after so many years of it. But doesn't make it any easier to lose somebody. So that was our parent. And during the pandemic as well. So what kind of challenges um, did that present for you potentially to lose somebody while COVID-19 is happening in our nation?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It was just a whole host of emotions that were going on, and you're right. It was anticipatory grief because she had been going downhill for such a long period of time, and I had been grieving the loss of my mother for so long that and just little. I call it cuts to the heart,
Mm.
and that had been going on for so long. But then when she passed away during COVID, on the one hand, I was able to work from home during that period of time. So I was home with her, and my brother came. So we were home with her around the clock towards the end. So in one way, that was sort of a blessing that I was working from home. On the other hand, we couldn't have the traditional funeral for her. We couldn't have all the rituals that came along with it, the comfort, the friends over, the religious community, all that was gone. But I still consider myself one of the lucky ones because my mother was home with me and she did pass away during COVID. I hear almost every day, and I'm aware of people that lost their loved one when they were in a nursing home that they couldn't go visit,
Mm-hmm.
or they were in a hospital and they couldn't be with them at the end. And I just can't imagine that level of grief where you can't be with somebody at the end, or just getting that phone call, or just being on FaceTime with somebody. So even though I went through this and it was awful and I'm still processing it, it's nowhere near not being able to be with your loved one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you were there for her and for you to be there and to have some piece. And like you said, there's always somebody who has it differently, not necessarily worse, but differently. So were you able to have some community with your family in a different way than you expected? And what did that look like?
We were able to have a service where she was buried at the cemetery. So my three boys came in for that, and my brothers, and so it was a very, very small circle. But other than that, and we had to have like sort of a socially distant. This was March 19th, which was like height of paranoia. I'm in New Jersey, so this was height of paranoia in New Jersey. So it was, there was no hugging or anything like that. One of my boys lives in New York, one of them lives in Maryland. So they were in very high risk states. So we couldn't even like comfort each other physically at that time. But I had a very small circle. But, it was interesting, a number of my friends, after somebody dies, generally people send food to the house, and, you have all this food and you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do with all this food?
I know.
Right? And my friends were even paranoid, like they couldn't even send food over because at that point you didn't know if you could get it from takeout food. So nobody was ordering, like anything for anybody. So it was a very sort of isolating experience. Like you just didn't get that comfort that you normally get.
It's a lot. It's a lot to cope and deal with. And I know, it's going to take time. It's going to take time. I know, every time my dad's got a birthday that's tomorrow, Father's Day is always, and it's been 6 years, and, it's still, and I'm sure it's been the same for your dad. Like you just, they're just always a part of you. They can't,
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually watching a movie last night, and there was an older person in it who sort of looked like my dad, and had sort of like the same sort of movement as him. And I just sort of paused the movie, and I was just staring at him because it brought him back a little.
Yeah, it kind of hits you in different ways and different. So I'll usually wear some green. He loved green, and I'll, we'll encourage the family to talk about stories when anniversary. But I'm always curious on how people recognize and that time, because you do think about them.
Yes.
And so what that looks like. So when you were caregiving, and I know your professional experience played a big part, but where did you find support, both physically and emotionally?
I worked at a nonprofit with a whole group of caregiving mothers, basically. So we were very, very much supportive of each other, and you almost couldn't find a better work environment to be a caregiver than where I was, because it was people that were in it for the mission and wanted to help people and understood the illness. So, you mentioned like being a caregiver and working in caregiving, that I brought this knowledge to it, but I still got angry. I still got frustrated. Even though I knew what was happening, I still had tremendous guilt for feeling angry and frustrated. So I was able to go into work and talk to people and say, my mother did this and it's making me crazy. And she's feeding the dogs, and we told her not to feed the dogs.
Oh.
And, so it was a really healthy environment for me to be working there. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard sometimes for people, it's just like that are in a healthcare or some kind of a caregiving related space, they never get to turn it off. Was that a struggle sometimes? It's like you're going to work and you're talking about it, and you go home and you're dealing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't watch any Alzheimer's related movies. There was a number of movies that came out. I didn't watch movies. I didn't read books that had to do with Alzheimer's. I really tried to separate from that a little bit, and that sadness a little bit. But you're right, it was all the time. It was home and it was work. It was just my world. It was very all encompassing.
So you had to protect your joy in other ways, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely had to separate. I didn't need to watch a movie about somebody going downhill or a husband taking care of a wife. I was like, no, I'm going to watch something stupid.
Yeah, enough already. I know I
Enough.
used to beg my mom, she would have Fox News on 24/7 and
Yeah.
mom, can you just please watch some fluff TV because
Yeah. Yeah.
it would aggravate her and make her anxious and
Yeah. And I think especially now, I think people have to separate from the news a little bit.
yes.
I think just listening to COVID, 24 hours a day, and this state is surging and that state is surging, and now it's this underlying condition, but now it's young people getting it. It's not healthy. You should be informed, you should know, but not 24 hours a day. I really think
Yeah.
it's too much. Yeah.
It's definitely what helps keep me sane is to have some boundaries around that. Um, when you worked for the nonprofit, you started an Alzheimer's respite care program. What did that look like, and do they still exist? How do people find out about these?
Yeah, they do still exist. During COVID, we had to pull it back a little bit because that was totally not socially distanced. You can't socially distance or expect somebody in the later stages of the illness to wear a mask or understand why you're wearing a mask. But it's a great program. It's called Caregiver Volunteers of Central Jersey, and it does have a program where we match volunteers to go into the homes once a week just to give the caregiver a break. And caregivers could do whatever they want. We had people that took naps, some met with friends, some took an exercise class. It's just a totally guilt-free time just to detach a little bit.
Yeah, what a gift. What a gift. So and then offering day activities and companionship for somebody. I could definitely see where that would give somebody a break and a nap for many of them
Yeah, it's
is well
amazing.
deserved.
Right. And it's also, the caregiver gets very close to the volunteer. So it's a trusted person to talk to and express what you're going through and express all those feelings that we all go through as caregivers and get other resources. So it's a very non-judgmental friend that you're getting. It's so many times, and I'm sure you hear it, people say, oh, I don't want to talk to my children. I don't want to burden them. I don't want them to know that I'm having a hard time. So they hold things in. But this is somebody that they could completely be honest and share, and which is so important.
Yeah, you've got to talk to people who understand and get it. And this is one of the reasons why I facilitate the Daughterhood Circle in the Atlanta area once a month, is just get a group of caregivers together. Nobody understands like a fellow caregiver. And then having it locally as well, then you're sharing other local resources that could benefit them. They need a financial planner, they need an elder law care attorney, or a day program, or whatever it is. Nobody has the best recommendations like another family caregiver. So are you still working with the caregiver canines?
Well, that was part of the nonprofit. I'm still involved with them. I still consult with them a little bit. But that also, I'm trying to rack my brains around how we could start that up again, because we had to stop that too. But I think more than ever, people are going to need that comfort of a dog and petting and touching something again, because we've all been so isolated and apart from everything. So we're trying to figure out how to start that again too.
It's such a neat thing, because I know that animals are so therapeutic for people to release that anxiety and just to feel calm and comforted for both the loved ones and the care recipient and the caregivers. But we don't want to give a caregiver another thing to take care of. So it's like, oh, you should get a dog. It's like, I don't want another thing. I want less to take care of. So
yeah. Well, we liken it to like being a grandparent. You have the grandkids over for a little bit, you play with them, and then they go home, and the parents have to worry about putting them to sleep at night. So it's almost like this with the dogs. You get the dogs for a little while, you have all the fun, and then they go home and somebody else.
Are they somebody, do these dogs live with certain people, or are they part of the organization's dogs?
They live with the volunteers, and they're trained by the volunteers. And then when we match people up who are living alone that can't own dogs, or a caregiver with somebody with dementia, And then the volunteer who owns the dog goes over to the house with the dog, and then they go home together.
That's okay. So you don't have all these misplaced dogs that you're trying to figure out what to do with.
No,
That's good. They're all at home.
these dogs have wonderful lives. If they have gone through the process of being a therapy dog, most of them are rescued, and then they go through training, and these dogs are very well taken care of. We could envy the lives of the therapy dogs.
I always say I'm coming back in my next life as a dog.
Yeah.
They've got the life, right? Like sleep and just get loved on. And
right.
My dog would not be a good candidate for a caregiver canine though, because he pretty much only likes us. So, but it's very sweet. But so now you're on a new venture. So you've left this, well, you're still involved with your private sector stuff, but now you're in the public eye in some ways, working with the U.S. House of Representative and Andy Kim.
Yes.
How did that come about? And
so I started working a little bit with Congressman Kim when I was still at Caregivers. He represents the 3rd District of New Jersey where I live in JO3. And I really like him. His major focus when he ran was on healthcare and protecting people in pre-existing conditions and lowering prescription drug costs. And so I got to know him a little bit when he was running, and then worked with him a little bit. And then an opportunity opened up, and my focus areas in this office are working with seniors and caregivers and veterans. So it fit completely into my passions. And I felt like I had advocated for caregivers my whole life. And this was just sort of a continuation of that, only on a broader range, with a different county and different districts and on policy issues. And it's been really incredibly rewarding because, I am that little voice in his ear, always talking about caregivers and seniors, and he's totally open to it. He's worked a lot with the Alzheimer's Association in New Jersey and AARP, and we've done a lot of things to help caregivers within our district and elevate their voices. So it was sort of a natural progression for me to move into that arena when there was an opportunity.
Yeah. Did he have personal caregiving experience himself? Is that why the issue's near and dear to him, or?
His parents are both older. His dad actually was a researcher who did research on Alzheimer's disease and polio. So he grew up in that sort of world. His mom is a nurse, and they both, are in the healthcare field and have their own medical issues. His children were born with some medical issues. So he knows this world a lot, and he's very sensitive to this world a lot. And where I live in Ocean County, New Jersey, is 170,000 people over 60 years old. So we have a very large elderly population here. So it's nice to have a congressperson that cares about them and is willing to learn how to advocate for them.
What are some of the issues that you all are specifically trying to tackle?
A lot of it right now has to deal with lowering prescription drug costs. There is, for Medicare, right now, pharmaceutical companies don't have to negotiate with Medicare for lower drug costs, which I think a lot of people don't know about. So they can basically, write, costs for whatever they want. So we're trying to work to have more negotiations with Medicare, trying to lower the cost of insulin and some of the common medications that people use. So that's one of the issues that we've been pressing hard on. There's one of the bills that he just signed on to was from the Alzheimer's Association, and it's to increase education to law enforcement as far as if they're called in an emergency, how to communicate with somebody with Alzheimer's disease, how to communicate in a crisis situation, and to work that into the training that police officers get. So that's another issue that we've been pushing.
That's great. I mean, especially if they encounter somebody when they're out wandering. I mean, how and their caregiver and so forth is not with them. That really they need to have those skills. Those are important.
Right. Yep. So we've been pushing on that as well.
Anything specific coming up related to the pandemic? Has that changed anything about where some of the focus is, or?
Well, what our office did during the pandemic was our office was broken up. We called it buckets. So there were some people in our office that dealt with the small business world, with the PPPs and the loans and all that sort of thing. Then there was other people that focused on economic security. So they dealt with unemployment issues and the stimulus checks and getting people to the food banks where they needed to go. My particular bucket was healthcare and first responders. So what I did was really advocate for people to get the PPEs that they needed, the cleaning supplies that they needed. And I've been very, very involved in the nursing home issue, and Congressman Kim has as well. So that was a lot of the constituent calls that we were getting, was that they were worried about their loved one in a nursing home. They weren't able to visit their loved one in a nursing home. And what do they do? How do we protect them? We pushed really hard. They just opened up in New Jersey. You can go visit your loved one outside, 6 feet apart, wearing masks. And we worked very hard to get that done as well. So that was a lot of the things that I was working on.
I mean, I think the natural inclination was to keep everybody so isolated, particularly in their rooms. I mean, I have caregivers have come to the Daughterhood Circle that hadn't seen their loved ones in a long time. And some of them weren't even interacting with each other, and there hadn't been a COVID case in, over 2 weeks. And it's like, okay, this isn't helping either to have them be isolated. So there's got to be some kind of managing risks, obviously, but also managing the isolation better, because that's detrimental as well.
Yeah, especially when somebody had Alzheimer's. One gentleman called me up. His mom was at a nursing home. She had Alzheimer's, and she had 7 children that lived pretty locally that would visit her. And she just wanted to know why all her kids deserted her. She couldn't understand that they weren't visiting because they couldn't visit. She just thought nobody loved her anymore. So when he called his mom, she would just say, "Why doesn't any of my children love me anymore?" Which is heartbreaking. Yeah. And they, a lot of times, like a lot of the nursing homes really try to do FaceTime and iPads and all that sort of stuff. And the person with Alzheimer's would just look at the nurse in the room. They really wouldn't understand to look at the screen and talk to somebody. It was so new, to them. So it didn't work at all. And so they were cut off completely, except for some phone calls. And they just wanted to know why nobody loved them.
Oh, I know. They've had to get super creative. I like when they at least have been able to see each other outside. I know some people have been ordering food for their loved one just to have something that they've enjoyed. And they just, really have had to get creative. And then of course it's a lot on the healthcare workers as well. Like we're asking a lot of them, and they're already in many cases understaffed. And
yeah, it was a crisis situation to start with the understaffing. And then you add COVID and not having enough PPEs and no visitors. So many families go in and help feed and, just do, little things for their loved one. And that was taken away. I mean, it took, my mother at the end, it took about an hour to get her to eat something. I mean, we would sit with her and just, take a sip of Ensure or take a little chocolate pudding, literally an hour. She wasn't a big fan in the nursing home. There's no way. There's no way. Yeah.
No, I know it. The another topics that have been coming up obviously lately in the news is a lot with the Black Lives Matter and the systemic racism. Are those things that you also get calls on in your office? Do you hear anything about systemic racism in healthcare? And I'm just curious if that's an issue that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a member of the local NAACP here, and they've been talking a lot about health disparities and inequality, and which was just elevated because of COVID. Now it's just sort of right in our face how bad this has been. So yeah, we've been very, very active on this issue. The congressman attended a number of peaceful protests. I went with him to some protests. We're looking at the policing reform bill that's coming up. we're actually having a teletown hall with Representative Hakeem Jeffries this Sunday, which is going to be talking about reforms and equality in healthcare. So that's definitely something that we're.
Yeah, there's a lot happening all at once. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming.
Yes.
If I know you're in tune to your congressman and where he falls on the different healthcare and caregiving related issues. And, as a layperson that's listening, like how do we become like more informed voters? Are there places we can go to find out where our local people vote on the certain issues, just to make sure that they're aligned with what we want to see as family caregivers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would definitely say you should look up who, so you'll have your state senators, and then you'll have your state representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives, and then you'll have your local legislators. So there's all different levels of government that you're going to have in your district. But I would definitely go to their websites, find out who your Congress people are, find out who your senators are. Go to their websites, look at the list of the issues that they have either voted on bills for or whatever, and really look at where they come down on some things. And it's important. And then if there is an issue that's important for you, that's the one thing that I did learn from working in this part of the world, is it does matter when constituents speak up. It does matter when you call the local office, if there is a bill that you see or something that you want supported, when you call or write a letter, they listen to that. They listen to their constituents. And the more people that speak up about something, the more it's elevated to them and something that they pay attention to. So I think, part of the thing is caregivers are so overwhelmed already. And then you're asking them, oh, now I have to call my congressperson. But I think it is really important, because I think for too long, these issues have not been paid attention to. And there's a lot of support that caregivers can use. So I encourage everybody to look at who represents them. They're your voice.
That's true. It's encouraging to hear it's not for naught, that it is actually make a difference. And so obviously we want to spend our time on the things that are going to drive change.
Right.
So that's definitely good to hear. I appreciate that. Do you think that the caregiving issues are there partisan lines, or do you think that both parties are trying to work together to come up with some of these resolutions and solutions to some of the things you've already mentioned?
Yeah, I think as far as caregiving goes, I think that's a bipartisan issue. Nobody could argue with that. I think where partisan comes in is always funding. What's going to get funded, what's not going to get funded. That's where things start getting a little bit, partisan or whatever. I know that there's things written into the HEROES Act, and that's the next stimulus bill that's hopefully going forward. So hopefully there will be some relief for caregivers and nursing homes in there. But I think as a general rule, most things are okay with caregivers. Most people agree with caregivers. It's just like with the Alzheimer's Association, how much funding goes to them, how much doesn't go to, goes to another organization. So that's where, things get a little hairy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure your nonprofit experience helps with that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely say if somebody is working for a nonprofit or is working for an advocacy group, once things start opening up again, try to make an appointment with your Congress people. You're probably not going to see the congressperson, but every congressperson has a district office. We have 2 district offices. And make an appointment to go in and meet with the district staff, tell them about your nonprofit or what you're really interested in, and just become involved with them so that they could hear your voice.
Do you also work closely with like the areas on aging? Is that something that
they
intersect?
When we were in the middle of COVID, I had weekly calls with the with 2 areas of aging from the 2 counties that we represent, just hearing about what their needs were, what was going on with them, what were some of the resources that they were providing, because we would get calls in our district office from people needing things. And so I just always wanted to have a sense of where I could refer people as well. But they, in the beginning, they were scrambling to get seniors meals because the traditional methods, they were incredibly scared to go into supermarkets because at that point, it still is. That was a very frightening experience. A lot of the traditional volunteer organizations stopped providing transportation or rides to things. So we were scrambling just to get meals to people in the beginning. So we worked together to work out systems for that.
I recommend when people are scrambling to figure out what services are locally available to them, that's usually where I encourage them to go first. That's
the
okay.
go-to. That's the go-to place, and then they refer out to the whole community, but they have their pulse on everything.
Yeah, good to know that. That's sound advice.
No, good advice.
How's your self-care? You've got your let's say, how was your self-care? How would you rate your self-care when you were in the heat of caregiving? Were you able to carve out some time for yourself, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I had aides that helped us, so that helped a lot. I did, try to go out on Saturday night or something, just to go away a little bit. It's hard. It's hard living. I'm fortunate that I was able to live with my mom, but it was also a very trying experience because, like you said, you're never away from it. And towards middle end of her illness, she only wanted me home. Like there was nothing else she wanted she wanted my father to be alive. If she couldn't have that, she wanted me to be home. So when I came home from work, I'd go to see her. And the only question she would ask me was, are you going to be home tonight? And if I had a meeting or I had to go out, there was this whole cascade of guilt that started when I had to tell her that I had to go out. Towards the end, I would tell her that I was going to be home, and then she wouldn't remember if I was there or she wasn't there. She moved into another phase. But we did try to get away a little bit, but we ate dinner with her every night. I saw her every day. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I'm the type of person, I like my alone time. So that was gone, basically. I never really had alone time. Yeah.
What are you doing with your alone time now?
Well, it's hard because I'm working from home now. My husband's home all the time. But yeah, I mean, I just sort of, again, like I'll just not watch anything too serious. I watch a little news and then I turn off. I try to watch stuff on Netflix or read a book or, something like that, just to detach. You can't really go too many places yet. So we go for walks. The weather's nice. I try to get outside at least every day for a little bit.
Yeah, I've never noticed the changes in nature as much as I have this year. I will say, like you go out and you're looking at the same trees, you're looking at the same, just more than I've ever paid attention to anything.
Yeah, I noticed that when we were walking, because there was no traffic, you could hear the birds more. So when we were walking, we heard all these birds, and I wasn't used to that, but there was no cars on the road. It was very quiet. So it was very sweet to be able to hear the birds again.
Yeah. It's just like, yes. And it can be a horrible time in our lives. And at the same time, it can have some blessings as well. Some silver linings, if you will. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely agree. Yeah.
Well, I got so excited about talking to you, Lynette, that I didn't pull anything from the Caregiver jar, but this is the words of inspiration. They're most of them are self-care motivated. It's a gift that I made for my sister when we transitioned care from my mom to Susie, because I just felt like I was giving her this humongous boulder of not a lot of fun. So it's, and so I just wanted her to have a little bit of encouragement in her ear. So wanted to read one of these to you. It says, I make time for fun, love, and laughter because self-care is my birthright and my priority.
That's great. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, it's like, what is it, the shoemaker's son or something like that. Like when I was talking to caregivers, I would say, you have to take time for yourself. You have to do this and don't feel guilty. You're entitled to it. And sometimes it's hard to follow your own advice, but
Yeah, it is. And I think to have the reminders of it. And, I was just sharing, writing a story for as a guest post for something that I've been asked to write. And, people want to know, why I'm essentially like this self-care bully, but it wasn't necessarily something that came naturally. It basically was out of the experiences of watching my parents, and my mother-in-law, frankly, like their lifestyle choices are what, they didn't get Alzheimer's or something that they couldn't necessarily control. And it was just a deterioration of their own health based upon, my mother-in-law smoked for her life. Even when she had lung cancer, she was still smoking. And my parents have had chronic health issues their whole life. So I watched like what happened to people when they didn't prioritize their own health and happiness. So I do think it's a birthright, and hopefully it becomes more of a priority. But what used to frustrate me too as a caregiver is like the shoulding, you should. And it's like, well, how, I've got limited time in my day. And so I think that for caregivers, self-care can look differently than it can for other people maybe, but I broaden it beyond the nutrition and the physical activity, I think is what comes naturally for people, but more that it also includes things like asking for help and receiving help, and setting boundaries, and like you had mentioned, protecting your joy, because that you can only handle so much, but you can control that. You can control these inputs that come into you. So I think we just have to get creative at self-care, and so trying on different ways to see what works for us.
And whatever works for you. I mean, for me, like when I do a crossword puzzle or something, that I totally focus on that. Like I forget about work, I forget about all the things that I need to do, and I'm just able to sort of zone out and do that, which is wonderful, which is really nice. And I think everybody, like you said, just has to figure it out, and nobody. Yoga isn't great, but it's not for everybody. So, just figure out what works for you, just to take a deep breath a little bit. It is really important.
And a night out and a weekend away is terrific, but those are very seldom. And so it's little nooks and crannies that I think have a meaningful impact when they're layered up and piled up against each other. So well, I wanted to get your thoughts on I have the Just For You journal. So we do this thing at the end called the lightning round, where I ask you a few questions from the book that I wrote. And so the thought behind this journal is just to make it fun. Like writing has been very therapeutic for me in my caregiving journey, because it's helped me kind of process the feelings and the emotions and just see myself a little more clearly. But I don't want it to be, I want to encourage other people to explore that, but not be overwhelming with it. So they're just little prompts. People can write a sentence or they can write a whole paragraph. We're just going to verbally talk through it. So let's see. First question I have for you, and I just go through them and bookmark a couple things. But one is, where do you find the inspiration to be healthy?
I think, again, very similar to what you said. I worked in the nonprofit world with older people for a very, very long time. And I saw people like in their 90s or 95 who were incredibly healthy and incredible, like sharper than me a lot of the time. And then there was other people who were in their 50s or 60s that were very ill. And so I was sort of like a nudge. I always had to ask the 90-year-olds, like, what'd you do? What's your secret? A lot of it's genetic. A lot of it is luck. But the one thing I found, like they kept active. They found purpose in their life. And it was, a lot of them ate ice cream or whatever, but they found joy. They were grateful, and they had a purpose in their life. And so I really feel like I had a lot of teachers in my life and a lot of role models, a very, very nice way to age. And I hope to replicate that in my own life.
I love that. That's awesome. And I think that you will, for sure. So, and I know that that was part of my husband and I's task is like, okay, enough of this crazy cycle. Let's break this cycle
Yeah.
and try, we know what that does. Let's try a different path. Do you have, so I know we've been cooking a lot, way more than I'd like to cook. That's not my
Yeah.
thing. I'm really good at eating, less the
Yep.
cooking part. But do
Yeah.
you have something that's been a go-to kind of quick and healthy meal for you?
I actually, I have three boys and they're all vegetarians. So I'm trying to go more vegetarian.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we actually, we decided to do Meatless Mondays. We're going to start small. And we got, I don't cook. I am like the most less domestic person out, like I'm with you.
Can't be good at everything, Lynette.
Yeah, no, no, no. Very good at ordering in.
Yes.
Excellent. But so we got these veggie burgers that we've been having all the time, and they're really good. I was really surprised. So I'm moving more towards being a vegetarian.
Nice.
That's my
More
goal.
plant-based. I mean, I've
Yeah,
heard it's better for your immunity, or at least
yeah,
to put more
yeah,
of that in your
right.
life. I'm
Yeah,
reading oh, she's a reporter. I can't think of her name right now. Her book is Blue. I'll share it in the show notes, but she basically takes a self-care challenge every month where she adds or subtracts a habit. And that was one that I just read about
yeah.
for the month where she added more plant-based foods. And yeah, I'll have to try the veggie. Are they in the freezer, frozen?
It's called, I don't know if I get, it's Dr. Prager's. I think it's a California veggie burger or something
Hmm,
like that. And you just put it in the toaster oven, they're just
that's
my
amazing.
speed, perfect. And they're good. It's really good. So yeah, that was
Okay. Well,
discovered
we got to
during COVID. Yeah,
try new things. I'll do it.
yeah.
I'll do it. Okay, last question I have for you is what's a life lesson that you believe needs to be taught in school?
Hmm. I think to be grateful. I think people need, I think that is so important. When I wake up in the morning, I think about three good things that happened the day before. And I do this before I go to sleep at night. And even if it was an awful day and I have a really hard time thinking of three things, I sort of force myself to think of it's small, like I couldn't find my keys, but then I found my keys, or I couldn't find my glasses. Oh my God, my husband had them. So it doesn't have to be huge things, but I just think I think we just have to be grateful for things, and that should be taught in school. How to be grateful. I
I
just
love
think,
that. That's so good. And it's easy, like
yeah,
a pretty easy A if you just do it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know for a while I was writing them, but I do think even if you think of them, I have heard some people even use this journal because if you write like a sentence, there's plenty of spots. Here's the prompt or whatever. But
yeah.
some people have written what they're grateful for the day. And I think the more you're grateful, the more good things start.
Right.
It
And
just
you
starts
become
multiplying.
aware of it. Like when something good happens, I think to myself, oh, this is going to be one of my good things for the day. So you become more heightened aware that something good happened to you. And so you see good things everywhere.
Wonderful. Well, I'm grateful for our conversation today because I've learned a lot.
Yeah,
And that's why I love doing these caregiver spotlights, because every time I talk with somebody, we all have different perspectives on things. And, I am not an expert in everything. But I love to learn and just kind of shine a spotlight on different things. And so we have not, you know, spoke about a lot of the things that you shared today about the canines and hopefully it's encouraged somebody to look for a respite in their area and when they open back up or whatever that looks like. Hopefully to have them get more involved with their local politics and figure out, where people stand on the issues with it being an election year. So lots of things to be grateful for in the conversation that we had today, Lynette. So
thank you.
how do people, if they want to connect with you, where's the best place to do that? And is there anything else that you hope that we would touch on that we didn't cover today, or parting thoughts that you want to leave with folks?
I want to thank you. This is going to be one of my good things for the day too. I think it's such a service that you're doing just to elevate the voices of caregivers and let people talk. sometimes it's so hard to open up and talk about these things. So thank you for giving voice to that. I could, people are happy to give out my email to you, so you could put those in the show notes. People could reach out to me if they have any questions or anything that they want to get in touch with me about. And again, I would just say, get involved, talk to your legislators. You have a voice. It's important. Use your voice. Elevate the voices of caregivers going forward so that elected officials don't forget about you when they're writing bills or funding things or thinking about how to move our country forward. We need to speak up as caregivers and ask for what we need. And I hope, if nothing else, I encourage people to do that.
Well, hopefully they will definitely do that.
Yeah.
And again, condolences with your mama.
Thank you.
I know that's going to be a process, and
Yeah.
that you've got support with your family, and you're actively working to make it different for other people. So that's got to feel good.
Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.